You're listening to EdTech Heroes, a podcast that looks at how teachers in today's classrooms can use technology to improve student learning. In each episode, a hero in the world of education will share their story and discuss how innovation can influence the minds of the next generation. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to EdTech Heroes. I'm Nef, and today's guest is Thom Gibson. Thom is a two-time Teacher of the Year educator and has taught middle school math and robotics, plus YouTube video production, and now serves as creative director at new EdTech Classroom. Outside of education, he's a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, an avid runner, a chicken wing and ranch connoisseur, and I just found out that he hosts his own podcast. Thom, welcome to EdTech Heroes.
It's good to be here, Nef.
That is quite a resume, not only in the amount of things that you've done, but also in what you've been able to accomplish. I know now you sit as creative director at new EdTech Classroom. Can you tell us a little bit about what that position entails and how you got from being this superstar educator to being a fantastic creative director?
The journey to new EdTech Classroom started when I was still in the classroom. Around 2015, I started making YouTube content for teachers, but at the time it was not only content for teachers, it was also like, let me make these filmmaking tutorials, let me do these travel vlogs, let me do these videos about eating the best tacos in Austin and rating them. And so I was all over the place. But then around 2019, I really started to think like, how can I focus my efforts on YouTube and creating content for other teachers while also showcasing some of the things that I was doing in the classroom. And it was cool because in an effort to make better content, I tried to make better lessons. And so they were like creating YouTube content with like a business online for other teachers actually helped make me a better teacher, helped stretch me a little bit more than I think I might have otherwise done. And around 2019, I also invited Sam onto my podcast at the time. And that's it really kind of what started a friendship between two people that were kind of doing the same thing. We were both making YouTube content. We were both kind of building this educational brand and creating resources for teachers. And then if teachers wanted to go beyond the YouTube channel and they're like, we want to dive deeper and learn more, we both had online courses and other resources that we sold to teachers. And me and Sam actually started using an app called Marco Polo, which is like these asynchronous video chat. So I could send him like a 6-minute video and I wouldn't have to like save it on my phone or anything. It was saved onto the app's servers and stuff. And then he would watch it when he got a chance and then respond with another video. And we would have all these conversations about like, hey, what's going on with the business? How are you doing this thing? And what about this online course? What's your YouTube content strategy look like? And we were just constantly just sending these videos back and forth. And to this day, me and Sam have actually not met in person. He's out in California and I am in Austin, Texas. And he's like, yeah, you're going to be surprised. I'm like, he says he's way shorter than he looks like on TV or on the camera. So eventually we started about doing a collaboration, and the more we talked, the more we realized that we didn't really want to just do a one-off collaboration. He actually invited me to become a partner with him at new EdTech Classroom. And as I thought about it, I'm like, I'm going to be able to make a much bigger both of us will be able to make a much bigger impact and reach a lot more teachers if we're not trying to both do this ourselves. Both of us are teaching teachers how to effectively use technology in the classroom, how to do innovative and engaging work with students in the classroom. So it made a lot of sense for us to partner up. And as far as my role as creative director, that really kind of entails like talking about and coming up with a vision for what is our strategy for creating YouTube content. Who exactly are we making YouTube content for? Because if we know exactly who we're making videos for, we can actually make more effective videos and more helpful videos for that target audience that we're trying to reach, and finding ways of like, how do we, because YouTube is really a game of like, how do you create a meaningful video, but also come up with a creative title and a thumbnail that is going to entice people to think like, oh, that will actually solve one of my problems to watch that type of video. And a lot of it's a blend of an art and a science. And so kind of taking the lead on some of that, as well as coming up with, how do we reach different audiences on various social media platforms? Like, the audience on TikTok and on Instagram is different than the people that are on YouTube. And of course, there's some overlap. But when you're on TikTok and Instagram, you're kind of in a different mindset than when you're on YouTube looking for an educational technology tutorial. And so how can we still serve the folks that are part of that target audience and the various platforms that we're putting content out? So that's kind of my role as creative director at New EdTech Classroom, and how I landed here at New EdTech Classroom as well.
Very cool. So, we have a lot of educators who listen to our podcast, and I am curious, what is the philosophy of New EdTech Classroom, and how do you all seek to innovate or help educators reach their students more effectively?
Yeah, one of the main things and the main tenets of what we believe at New EdTech Classroom is like teachers can learn new technologies. I think as teachers, sometimes, particularly the teachers that don't feel like they're like, I'm not the tech savvy teacher at my school. It takes me a few tries before I really start becoming comfortable with technology. Just reinforcing the growth mindset for all of our teachers. Like, you can learn these new technologies, and not learning them just for the sake of learning them, but learning them because in many cases they can create a different kind of experience for your students that you might not be able to have without certain technologies in the classroom. And if you want to also have a classroom where you're teaching your students how to learn new technologies, whether it be screencasting or word processing or email management, you yourself have to also become a student of those things. You don't have to be a pro at those things, but you have to come in with a learner's spirit, with a learner's attitude, and just believing that you can learn these things. And last year, I did several projects with my students about Minecraft. In no world will I ever know more about Minecraft than my students, and that is okay. But over the summer, I did go through several Minecraft modules. I played the game. I built some things. I realized, like, wow, this is actually kind of fun, even though I'm not going to invest all of my hours into mastering Minecraft. I got a general feel of what I could do with the game, and then started exploring how other teachers were utilizing Minecraft in their classroom. And then I found ways that I could use Minecraft in my classroom to teach students about cube roots. And I told them, like, okay, here's what I want you to build in Minecraft, and record a screencast of what you build and turn that in, and that's what I'm going to grade. And so I made it a point to be like, okay, I don't have to be the master of this. I don't have to be the expert in this, but I do want to learn this enough to bring it to my students, because many of them were just so stoked that they could actually do a Minecraft activity. And that's what we try to impart on teachers. Like, you can learn this for your own sake and for your students' sake, to create that innovative classroom where you're trying new things and your kids see that you're trying new things. And sometimes it'll go great, sometimes it won't. And regardless of what happens, you'll learn from it, and continue pressing forward and just doing the best that you can to give your students that meaningful experience in the classroom.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that you all at New EdTech Classroom spend a lot of time really understanding new tech tools, understanding how they might be implemented in the classroom so that you all can impart that knowledge on other educators. And from what I understand about you, Tom, this has been really a mindset that has existed for you for quite some time, way prior to you actually joining New EdTech Classroom. Can you talk a little bit about what initially drew you to the idea of using technology in the classroom, and also this mindset of being willing to fail, which I think is pretty cool, right? Like, you just said, like, hey, maybe this Minecraft thing is going to be an epic failure, but that's all right. We're going to try it anyway. And maybe those two are connected, between trying technology and being willing to fail, and maybe they're not, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the first tech things that I did in the classroom, it actually related to video. I studied audio engineering, so I've always been a fan of tech, which is kind of funny because if you've heard Sam's story, he's like, yeah, I was the teacher that was like anti-tech for a long time. I'm like, not me. Like I was, I was like all about the tech, like coming into the classroom. But in my teacher training, I remember that one of the teachers was sharing his experience where he made these videos with his students, and it was called the Dear World Project. And he would have these students finish the statement, like if you had a message to the world, what would it be? And he wouldn't record them saying their message, but they would actually write it down. They would write it on their arms, or they would write it on a board and hold it up. And it was beautiful just to kind of see a lot of these students' experiences. Some of them were silly, some of them were heartwarming, some of them were just sharing and putting their voice out there. And it was really adapted from this photography project from a photographer named Robert Fogarty, who would do the same thing. But it was cool to see how this teacher had adapted it for his classroom. And so that was like, okay, well, I like making video. And so I remember my very first year, I did that with my students. And then I shared that video with the parents of those students. And, they all loved it and everything like that. And I look back on those videos now, and like, the production value like was very different than what I have now, because I didn't know as much about cameras and audio and video editing and stuff. But it was my first iteration of doing something like that, because I knew that there was value in it, and just an opportunity to give students a voice in my classroom in a different way and in a different manner. And then another aspect of like doing something in the classroom that I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, is doing something called a classroom economy. It's where kids have class jobs and then they get paid in classroom money, and they can buy stuff with the money and everything. And then they have to like pay fines for like misbehavior and things like that. And I remember reading about it in a book by a teacher named Rafe Esquith. And what stinks is like in his book, it was like only like 4 pages or so of the entire book where he kind of talked about it a little bit and gave like a really high level view of what it was. But I'm like, I really want to know like all the details of this, like the ins and the outs, and how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you set it up? What about the kids and do this? And I had so many questions. And at the time I had already had classroom jobs, but I was like, all right, so second semester is going to come around. I'm like, all right, we're going to make classroom money. I'm going to print it out, and the kids are going to have write checks and stuff. And then they're going to have bankers, and they're going to have deposit slips and stuff. And I just remember it just took so much class time. I remember thinking like, I don't know how this teacher like got through his content and was like doing this classroom economy thing every day. And then I kept trying it over the years. And I even remember sitting with some of my admin out there like, what are some of your reflections on this year? And I was like, well, the classroom economy thing, the kids love it, but sometimes like in an hour and a half long class, we do this classroom economy thing that I think is going to take 10 or 15 minutes, and it takes like 45 minutes. And my admin was like, well, why do you keep doing it? And I'm like, well, I really think there's something here. I really think there's something meaningful. The kids are empowered because they've got these classroom jobs and these responsibilities. They're learning financial literacy. They get really excited about making money and buying things in the classroom. So I think there's a really rich experience. I need to figure out how I can optimize it and streamline it in a way that it's not taking significant amounts of time away from the content that I'm trying to teach. And so over the years, I actually started, everything was like paper based when I started it. And I started thinking of like how I could use different tech tools to streamline lots of things. So eventually I ended up finding these online bank systems. There was one called PayGrade. It's called Stash 101 right now, but it was called PayGrade. And it was like you could create this online virtual bank where students had their checking accounts and their savings account, and I could put what their class job was and class responsibilities. So there was no more paper money, which I'm like, well, that's good because that's one less thing to worry about. It's more realistic to life because I almost never use cash anymore. I don't remember the last time I wrote a check. And so I don't use deposit or withdrawal slips at the bank. So those weren't skills like that they were even going to need by the time that they were out of my 7th grade, math class. And so I started streamlining so many aspects of it. And I kept with it, and I kept iterating and changing it and making it better and sharing ideas with other teachers. And then they were doing it and then telling me how they were optimizing it. And so it was kind of like I was sharing this idea with other teachers, and then they were sharing what they were doing, and we were both kind of benefiting from the mutual growth. But I went into it like knowing like, okay, I'm doing this. It's not going according to plan. How can I change it? How can I iterate it? Because there is value here. I don't want to give up on it. And technology ended up playing a really big role for me in making that switch and making that end up working in my classroom.
Very cool. Very cool. So it sounds like sticking with it was so important because it would have been easy, I imagine, after that first couple of years of saying, this is taking 50% of my time and I'm supposed to be teaching middle school math. I've got to absolutely ditch it. So I am curious if you are an educator who is talking to an administrator who maybe isn't as supportive as yours was, how do you make the argument to continue with something that has some potential but maybe hasn't quite lived up to it yet? It could be a new technology tool or maybe a classroom economy, but how do we allow ourselves to get the persistence that we need to take ideas to their fruition?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like finding ways that you can scale back, finding like where are the things that are taking the biggest amount of time, where are the things that are not working, and like if I can find the biggest points, like I can't fix all the problems with it, but if I can find the biggest problems with it, and for me in the classroom economy, it was like, okay, like the day that students are like buying things in the auction and then trying to withdraw money and like all of the transaction of papers and everything like that, that's what I realized was taking forever, and what sparked me to like, okay, if I solve that problem right there, then I think like that's when I'm going to be able to optimize this a little bit more. Identifying kind of like your biggest problem and then tackling that, versus trying to think of like all the things that may not be working, and then just feeling overwhelmed with it and being like, oh, there's nothing I can do, because that whole like transaction of money and everything, that's what led me to start thinking like maybe there's got to be like some online kids fake version of a bank thing somewhere. And I started like kids bank, virtual bank, online classroom economy bank, like searching for all these things and then coming across those different platforms that did do that. And so for me, that's what ended up helping me actually, move forward with it. I did have a supportive administration. I know everybody does not have that. And so my administration also kind of only knew about it because I did disclose that to them, because administrators often are not in your class even like very much, and they're not in there for very lengthy periods of time. So it was part of a self-reflection. And so in that case, if I had an administration that maybe was not as supportive, I probably would not have disclosed that like there's aspects of this that are taking way too much time and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to change it. But I did feel comfortable sharing that with my admin, knowing that they were supportive of it and that they were just going to press me on it, and in a healthy way, in a supportive way, on ways that I could optimize it. But I like what Jen Gonzalez of Cult of Pedagogy, the podcast, what she says. She had a whole episode not too long ago about teacher subversiveness. Basically, like sometimes you're asked to do things or asked not to do things that aren't in the best interest of you or your students. And if you're asked to do something that's not in the best interest of your student, sometimes you just don't do it, and then you don't call any attention to yourself for it. Or in this case, if a teacher, if admin is saying you have to stop doing X, Y, or Z, maybe you keep doing it and you don't broadcast it and you don't announce it, and you do what you know is going to be best for you and your kids, and you cross your fingers and hope for the best. And sometimes that is what it takes. And of course, using a word of caution, like there may be repercussions with that, but sometimes I think that's what it takes to do interesting, innovative, engaging work in our classrooms when we don't always have the most supportive administration behind it.
Yeah, sure, sure. I am also a big fan of Cult of Pedagogy. So cool that we can connect on that as well. I want to go back a little bit to this video project that started in lots of ways your love affair with technology. So I am curious, how did that go? And what led you to say that video was going to be the important meme for that, uh, in contrast to the medium that you originally found that in it just being something written that students were turning in? Why video?
Well, the original teacher that did do it, like he did have them writing it down, but his original idea was video as well. He just took a video of them like kind of holding up that image, and so it was like a little bit more powerful, because we've all seen like one of those like Instagram posts where someone's like holding up a sign and they're sharing a message and they're slowly taking one poster board away, and like there's something captivating about that. But I continued to do that project year after year. And even like when I moved schools and I went to middle school and I did it in my advisory, I even modified it over the years because I would take, I would have kids from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They would be my advisees all throughout their middle school years. And so when they're in 8th grade, I would always include, like if they're in the 8th grade year, they're with me, I always included clips of what they had said in 6th grade and 7th grade, and then showing now what they're saying in 8th grade, because then you would see kind of that transformation of the students, which tells a story in and of itself of that student's growth there. But video, like that was one aspect of where I found myself using video in the classroom. I remember in 2012, 2013, I was learning more about teachers using a flipped classroom model, where they, at the time, it was like, oh, have the students watch the lecture at home so they could work on the activities and what was traditionally homework in class, because then they could ask questions. But I remember, like with our student demographic, not all of our students had devices at home, and so back in 2013. I was starting to record math video lessons for my 5th graders. And then I had this little checklist for them where they would be like, okay, I want you to watch this video. And then I want you to try these practice problems. And I want you to work together with people. And while that's going on, I'm going to be calling people in small groups, which is funny because this was back in 2013. And like now, I mean, Screencastify is partnered with the Modern Classrooms Project, which is exactly this model. It's kind of like a new take on the flipped classroom, where it's not so much about watching the videos at home, but instead of just watching the videos, whether at home, whether in class, but self-paced learning for the students. And it definitely had its growing pains. I mean, when I was working in small groups, there'd be kids that were kind of goofing around, or they weren't watching the videos, or they watching the videos on mute, or they were watching the videos and they weren't taking the notes. But that was like the first iteration and first time that I found myself like thinking like, I could actually use video as like a teaching tool. And then, not all of my students were jiving with that, but that allowed me to at least connect with those students and get more one-on-one time with them, or more small group time with them, as opposed to, me doing it, as a whole group lecture, and like, a third of the class kind of checked out from that anyways. And so I think a lot of teachers are like, oh, well, not all our learners, can learn from video, so I'm going to continue lecturing, as if all of our learners like learn best from lecturing, So I think with everything in the classroom, teachers are so hesitant to try something new because they feel it's not going to reach all the learners. But there's a lot of things we do, that don't reach all the learners. The goal is just like, what can we do to try to reach more learners, to become more accessible, and differentiate and fill in the gaps from there. But that was like the beginning of using video as an instructional tool with my students, which was like way back in 2013 or so.
Very cool. And I love two aspects of what you said. The first being what video allows us to do. And I think if we look at it from that perspective, we might say that there are students in our classroom who fundamentally don't learn very well from video. And that's okay. But if we give video to the folks who do learn best from that medium, that allows that one-on-one attention with the student who really, really needs that. And if we rely solely on whole group instruction, there's no opportunity to have that one-on-one connection. And I so love the idea of being able to include more students and continually iterate on what becomes good for the students that we serve. So I am obviously a huge fan of video, and I know that you all are too. You, Thom, as an individual, and New EdTech Classroom, so much so that Screencastify and New EdTech Classroom have now partnered. And one of the things that I know that you all do really, really well is the New EdTech Classroom Academy. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and what teachers can expect from that program?
Yeah, the new EdTech Classroom Academy is a membership community where we offer many of our online courses, access to all of our online courses to teachers that are a part of the Academy membership. So as opposed to buying like individual courses, like I have a course that is all about the classroom economy that I was mentioning, of like how to run that and how to set it up, and courses on classroom jobs and things like that. That one's called like 21st Century Classroom Culture. All of our academy members just have access to those courses whenever they're ready to dive into that content and start implementing some of those technology strategies, or in that case the classroom economy in their group. We also have webinars each month. Sam was leading a webinar on getting your educational technology systems and your LMS up and running at the beginning of the year. He did that in kind of August to support teachers that were kind of like, all right, I need a little bit of guidance in setting this up. We also had Jake Miller of Educational Duct Tape, just came out with a new book. He led one last Monday, exclusively for Academy members, and members also get discounts on various platforms, various partnerships that we have with other companies and things like that, and support from us in a community Slack channel, and support from one another as well, where teachers are like, hey, I'm trying to use this thing and I want to try to find an app that does this, and has anyone ever worked with something like that? And people will chime in and be like, oh yeah, I've used this app, or oh, I've used this app, but their free plan is okay, but their premium package is really where it's where it's been helpful. And then we'll have Q&A calls with them as well for Academy members, which is video access and video conversation. So that's kind of like what our community membership looks like. And a lot of the big piece is access to those online courses. And we've really tried to make those courses as digestible as possible, where it's shorter videos, where many of the videos, as you're watching them, the participants are getting asked questions in the middle of the video to be able to engage. Like, all right, am I tracking with this? A little bit more engagement than just sitting and watching. Many of our videos have like action items of what to do. It's like, okay, you learned about this thing. We don't want you to just learn about it. We want to give you the tools and the resources of how to actually begin to implement this in your class. And many of the courses we have, like Google Docs, that teachers can just take what we have and then just start tweaking and modifying it so that it fits the needs of their classroom and their students. Trying to do as much of the work as possible to support the teachers and get them ready for success as they implement whatever it is that they're learning through some of our online courses, which the basis of those courses is video. And so that's kind of the role that video has played in the courses and in our online membership community called the new EdTech Classroom Academy.
Very cool. So it's all full circle, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're an educator and you're looking to learn a little bit more about using video amongst other things, then the new EdTech Classroom is awesome. But it also gives educators an opportunity to put themselves in the position as students and see how they digest video content. And I don't know about you, but every time I have been in a course that is online and uses video, whether it's designed effectively or not, I end up learning something about how I can design similar experiences for my students. So that also is awesome in and of itself. So I want to ask one more question, if that's okay with you. And
I would
I
love
know
it.
that you have seen tons of online resources, and whether those are ed tech tools, they are curricular resources, or anything in between. What are some of your favorites? And if folks are looking for more recommendations from you, where can they find you?
So, in the world of just online training, what's funny is I actually have learned a lot, just to your point of like whenever you go and do online training and like you're kind of learning like what you like and what you don't like. Me and Sam were actually a part of a online course that was meant to like, how do you grow a YouTube channel that surrounds your business? And it's like, it's not just like, oh, here's how to upload a YouTube video. It's like, how do you tell better stories stories? How do you hook your audience? How do you engage them? How do you keep them wanting to watch more of your content? How do you help the people that are watching your videos the most and connect with them the most? And through that experience, it was really interesting because the model was like, we had these video lessons that the creator of this course had made, and the videos were, as long as they needed to be. Many of them were under 10 minutes, but some of them where he was diving into like how to actually explore the analytics of YouTube. Some of them tended to be longer, but since I was like, very interested in that content, I was still watching it, and wanting to learn more and take notes. And I wasn't like, oh, this video is so long and boring. So I paid for this course, whereas your students are like, you may not have paid for the course that they're with you. But what was interesting is we came back together once a week for an hour and a half meeting. I was like, okay, what were the things that you were doing when you did the assignments? Because the video lessons also had assignments. What were some of your pain points? What were some of the things that, aha moments? What are some of your action items? Okay, I want you to go into your breakout rooms and share what you came up with for this part of the assignment. And I want you to give feedback in these ways. And it was a really meaningful and engaging experience for us to be able to kind of be student in that regard, and having, video lessons for the most part that were on the shorter end, were very clear, that were very concise, that were broken up into short little segments each. They weren't trying to teach us 10 things with one video. They made 10 separate videos, each one teaching us one particular thing with one particular action item and one particular assignment. And so I think that helped us as learners digest it a lot more. And then the time that we actually came back together, they weren't, repeating everything that we learned in the videos, but instead we got to verbally process out loud and show the work that we were doing and get feedback in real time from other people. And so that was all happening via Zoom. And so some of the listeners here may be in that scenario, or some of them may be back in person. But that's what I had kind of learned about, like having videos that are very focused on, like what's the one thing that you want to teach your students. I just did a session on this past Saturday, titled 5 Screencasting Mistakes That You're Probably Making. And one of them was like, your videos are just so long. You're trying to take this lecture that was like an hour, and then you're like, maybe you're condensing it down into like 18 minutes, but even that is so long. And so it's like, okay, well, how long is your intro? Yeah, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay, do your intro, and then do your concept that the actual teach the concept in another video. And now each one of these examples, instead of doing all 5 examples in one video, make each example its own video. It's okay if the video is only 2 minutes long. You don't have to make a video that's like, oh, that'll be such a short video. That's even better, because it'll be a lot more digestible. It'll be so much easier for your students to go back to and reference. And so creating these shorter, more bite-sized videos where there's only one thing that you're trying to get across to your students is going to be making it a lot more accessible to your students. And then having maybe guided notes or something like that helps the students continue to track. It's like, okay, here's the intro. I watched the video. There's a link to that video. Okay, I got that part filled out in my notes. Okay, here's the next part of the notes. Let me watch this video, and that's going to cover these next 2 points that I need to fill in my notes. And so that makes it just so much more easy. It's so much easier for your students to take in. And then having that time where you actually have your students do something with what they learned from those videos. And so that way, the time that you actually do have together, they are getting that real-time feedback, real-time interaction, similar to what me and Sam were experiencing with our online course on how to grow a YouTube channel. And so even though that wasn't like a EdTech resource, something that us as video creators and content creators, and just, us being in a learner situation, something that I think a lot of teachers can still take from in that regard. And as far as other resources for other teachers, I'm sure your listeners already know about the Modern Classrooms project, but this is just another endorsement for them. They're one of the few, now that I'm not back in the classroom, I actually listen mostly to like business podcasts and like how to be, create a business online, creative director, kind of stuff. But the Modern Classroom project, is one of the few, educational podcasts that I still listen to, just because I'm just like, I'm so impressed and fascinated with the work that they're doing. I went through their free online course last year when I was in the classroom, and I was like, oh man, this is like really similar to what I was doing way back in 2013 that I kind of moved away from, but they've structured it and systematized it so much more. And a lot of the things that weren't working when I was doing it way back in the day with my fifth graders, they're like having a pacing tracker that's visible, or how to actually make some of the resources like Screencastify now. Not as many of them were as available as they are now. So I would say like that is the place to go, the first place to go if you want to create video lessons for your students, and you want to create a classroom that is self-paced and empowers your students to direct their own learning.
For sure. All right. So if you're looking for resources, check out the Modern Classrooms Project. We had Kareem on the show. He is amazing and incredibly innovative, and love the work that he's doing. And once you start to create that video content, Thom, I absolutely love your tidbit there of starting small, segmenting content, and thinking about videos that teach one particular concept at a time, instead of trying to bite off everything that you want your students to know. And the really cool thing is that when we have these videos that are bite sized, it actually allows for more self paced learning, because students can say, okay, I need this 5-minute piece, or I need that 5-minute piece, which is absolutely awesome. I appreciate the tips. I'm going to take some of them. And I know that our listeners will as well. Thom, I really appreciate you joining EdTech Heroes. And listeners, be sure to follow Thom on Twitter. He is at GibsonEDU. And check out newiedtechclassroom.com. I'm your host, Nef Dukes, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of EdTech Heroes, presented by Screencastify.